Hello and welcome to Salar. I'm Zardana Simran, and today we're in conversation with Dr. Sandeep Shastri. He's the Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal. He has extensive experience across diverse domains of politics, research, and institution building. He's a political strategist and he's played a key role in drafting the Karnataka youth policy. Today, we will be discussing what the second wave of the pandemic looks like, the government's complacency, and what we should be doing in the new normal. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, for joining in. I want to start off by asking you that, India dealt with the first lockdown in a very different way than how we are dealing with it during the second wave, right? And do you think that Modi's government sort of failed because of the casual attitude that they had, and with the new normal coming in, just not paying that much attention to the healthcare during the second wave? Is this what caused the chaos?
When we look at the way the second wave of the pandemic has been handled, I think there is no question of doubt that we could have demonstrated much greater preparedness. There is also no doubt that there was a need for a much more proactive approach. It goes without saying that we should have exhibited much more caution in terms of anticipating what would happen. I think too much was made and too much publicity was provided for the way we were believed to have successfully handled the first wave of the pandemic. I think the first wave of the pandemic should have taught us several lessons in terms of how such calamities need to be dealt with, how such emergencies need to be handled. I think there is no element of doubt that a sense of complacency set in.
Right.
Once we believed that we had tided over the crisis.
Yeah.
Now, where did the complacency set in? I think it's important to underscore the fact that this complacency set in at multiple levels. It could have set in with the government, both at the national level and at the state levels. It could have set in with citizen community groups.
Right.
And of course, it could also have set in with individual citizens. So I think it's important to spread our brush across the entire canvas.
Correct.
Because what is happening is, unfortunately, today, in trying to get a feel of why we have come where we have come, in terms of our inability to handle this present challenge, we seem to be indulging in a blame game.
Yeah, I was just getting at that.
X is responsible, Y is responsible, Z is responsible.
Yeah.
And given the sharp polarization that this society witnesses, it's a wonderful game to play. Blame the other.
Yeah.
So I think in this whole fight of we and they, we have forgotten that we are us actually.
Yeah.
And I think at multiple levels, this there has been a casualty. I think the government at the national level did not prepare itself adequately for the second wave.
Right.
We should have used the time that we had between the residing of the first wave and the rise of the second wave to prepare ourselves for that. Be it in terms of our healthcare requirements, be it in terms of this whole oxygen shortage we are witnessing, be it in terms of creating emergency health facilities. Now, I think the time needed to have been used in that, and I think we lost precious time in that.
Yeah.
Secondly, I think we also, there seemed to be, there seems to have been an inability to define our priorities, right? What should have been the principal focus of authorities?
Right.
Should the principal focus of authorities have been dealing with the pandemic, which I believe it should have been? Then should other issues have been put on the back burner? And across the board, should we have been a little more strict in enforcing the requirements in terms of discouraging mass gatherings?
Right.
Now, we can look at it from two perspectives. Should the Election Commission have exercised greater caution?
Yeah.
In terms of the spread of the election? Should it have exercised greater caution in terms of the norms as to how the campaign is carried forward?
Yeah.
Should all political parties have exercised restraint in terms of how they took their campaign forward? I'm not placing the blame at the doorstep of any single party. I'm saying across the board.
Across the board, of course. And
so what has happened is, for short-term gain, you have forgotten long-term consequences.
Yeah.
So yes, I do believe that in hindsight now, we should have taken appropriate steps. And I'll also come to the other aspect. I think once the first wave of the pandemic receded, I think you also had an element of complacency coming in society. In urban areas, you did more notice some semblance of mask wearing and all that. But you moved out of urban areas, it seemed to be life is normal.
Yeah.
Marriages continued to be held with the same fanfare.
Yeah.
Visits to religious places continued with the same previous fervor. Election rallies continued to have thousands of people accumulating and nobody following COVID protocols.
Yeah.
So I think at multiple levels, there has been complacency. Government level, citizen level, community level, at all levels, we have had an element of complacency coming in.
Correct. And I think, like you already mentioned rightly, right, whether it was the elections and just the way the campaign was done by saying that, okay, there is 100% safety. How can we ensure that there was 100% safety? That is where I think, the general public was trying to hold the government accountable, because you cannot give them that assurity that there is this safety when we are still in the middle of a pandemic, whether it was the elections or the mass gatherings, or the religious things that were happening all around the country. All of it just sort of led to the rise in the second wave, right, the cases. So do you think, again, if this was handled in a better way, the cases would have been much lesser? If yes, then how do you think it should have been handled?
I think there is no shadow of doubt that it needed to be handled better. But that's a simple question.
Yeah.
The more complex question was, who all were the stakeholders who should have been part of that process of handling it with more seriousness?
Yeah.
While I would hold those elected at all levels being accountable for this. I would therefore not transfer away the accountability from others. While the powers to be at multiple levels were responsible for having to take decisions. Mm-hmm. But we have unfortunately become a democracy where we enjoy playing the blame game. And not realizing that when one finger is pointing at somebody else, three fingers are actually pointing at me.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. There should have been greater care, caution. There should have been greater care and caution in preventing mass gatherings.
Yeah.
You may be talking about a marriage. You may be talking of a religious gathering. You may be talking of an election rally. For me, all three are examples of mass gathering.
Yeah.
Not that one was wrong and the other was right because one is private and one. No. Yeah. I think the mistake we are doing is we are trying to find excuses to justify one. Or we are saying, look, when X allowed it, why don't you allow Y to allow it? Like as if one wrong will right another wrong. You see, This has become the way. You see, if I point out that X happened and which was wrong, what is the defense? Yeah, X happened, but remember Y also happened. Now, I'm not saying Y is okay.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is X should not have happened, Y should not have happened, period.
I mean,
but what you in society today is X happened, but because X happened, because Y happened, and Y happened because Z happened. So where are we? You see, where are we heading towards? Right. I think the challenge is nobody is willing to take responsibility that this was a collective failure on our part.
Yeah. And in fact, I was reading this article recently, which I came across, which said that, during this entire thing, like you said, it is about the blame game that, okay, it was either the government or it was the people. Regardless of that, it is us against the problem. But what's happening currently is that it's easier to just, put the blame on someone and just walk away like nothing even happened. Because given the situation, of course, the government is and should be held accountable for what is happening, but also a large part of how we deal with it as individuals plays a huge role, right? Whether it's wearing your mask, trying to maintain social distancing, only stepping out when it's required. Now, moving away from this, because I think we've tackled the reasons of why this could have happened. My next question to you is that there is like a point of view backing from the Congress saying that, that the Modi's government's aversion for evidence-based policy making has pushed India into the current crisis, right? And we can take the example of senior virologist Shahid Jamil's resignation, where he mentioned that there is no place for professionals who can speak their mind freely without fear and favor. So this is one instance that I'm giving you. Could you please share like your comment and tell us more about this?
See, it was years ago when Lord Acton said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. My implication is whichever political party has come to power, national level, state level, any level, the headiness of power is such that once in power, you do not give credence to evidence that is there before you. Now, I think this responsibility which comes with power, the humility that should come with power, the sense of right and wrong which should come with power. I think years ago it was Mahatma Gandhi, and earlier to that Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who said, assuming power is an act of sacrifice.
Right.
Now, that does not seem to be the spirit with anybody who is in power. So, uh, I would hold the entire political class responsible for treating data in a way that is convenient to them. Now, not going by evidence that is provided. Now, unfortunately, today we are in a world where we have an information overload.
Right.
So what happens is you have evidence and you have counter evidence and you have counter evidence. And everybody is busy finding evidence to defend what they would want to say. See, nobody is looking today at evidence to look at what evidence is telling you.
Right.
There is a conclusion I want to reach, which I've already reached.
Yeah.
There is a government I want to defend. There is a party I want to defend. There is a leadership I want to defend, whichever. And I'm not here singling out any. This is, you look at the history of power, this has been the case. So when I've decided what I want to defend, I'm going to search for evidence which helps me defend what I want to defend.
Right.
Where I stand depends on where I sit. That's the basic point. Where I stand on an issue depends on where I sit. Where I sit in terms of what standpoint do I support.
Yeah.
Now, it is academics like me who are not associated with any political formulation, who are looking at evidence.
What's actually happening on ground.
But given the polarization you have in society, when I provide that evidence, people will look at that evidence from the point of view whether it helps them reach the conclusion that they would like to reach. Right. This is the challenge that we are having in society today.
Because like you said, it's also because we are mostly reaching the conclusion and then it's like we're going, we're taking a step back. It's not the other way around where you find the evidence.
It's like, you see, if you are conducting this interview and you tell me, look, this is the conclusion I want to reach. So now come on, give me answers to reach that conclusion.
Exactly.
So we are not driving this interview that way. You are posing a question and you're looking for the openness of the answer that comes from that question.
Yeah.
But if you had told me before the start of this interview, Dr. Shastri, this is the conclusion I want to drive. So now you please drive your vehicle towards that conclusion.
Of course.
Now we are not doing that. Yeah. We are I don't know the questions you are going to ask me. And I'm responding based upon how I see the evidence at the current point of time. Right. But sadly, this is not how the debates are going on in today's society.
Because again,
in today's society, we are taking positions based upon the position we want to take and then collecting evidence to defend that position.
Yeah. And like you rightly said, right, even as member of the media, we have to sort of have a neutral perspective, because what we are telling the people is actually what is happening rather than what we think, whether it's, liking the ruling party or not liking the ruling party or taking the opposition side or not. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. It's actually speaking about what is happening. But again, what happens here is that you will, obviously hold, like I said, again, we're going back to our first question, hold the people at power accountable, because no matter how much we say that we as individuals could have worn masks and done this and done that, the government still is responsible for whether it's the healthcare services or the way we, look at our vaccination, the information that is spread out and whatnot, right? So now moving on, I want to get to this where our prime minister, whose image is hailed for his oratory and, winning elections sort of comes from the image that has been built up. Do you think the COVID-19 crisis has diminished that?
It's too early to say. We have not heard the end of the story as to how the second round of the pandemic has been dealt with. We are still seeing the process of response. We are still seeing the impact on the ground. Beyond a shadow of doubt, this is the most difficult, challenge the Prime Minister has faced in his 7 years in power. This is the most, now some people would even say that why are you just looking at Mr. Modi's 7-year tenure? Some would even argue that in the 74 years since independence, this is the gravest challenge. The entire pandemic has been the gravest challenge any leadership has dealt with.
Yeah.
So, yes, this is a huge challenge that the present leadership is facing. And I think there is no question of doubt that in these 7 years of his being Prime Minister of the country, this is one of the most serious challenges that the Prime Minister faces. Some would even go to the extent of saying that in the last 74 years of independence, this is the biggest challenge any leadership in this country has faced. I would say it's too early to talk about what would be citizens' evaluation of how the government has handled this crisis, because the crisis is still ongoing.
Correct.
A lot of people would have believed that much more could have happened than what actually happened.
Yeah.
That there could have been a little more proactive response from the government. That view is quite strongly held. But I think at the end of the day, when this pandemic, the second wave recedes, the question I think which a lot of people will have on their minds is, did the government do enough? Could it have done more?
Yeah.
That question I think will definitely be there. And I think the manner in which the pandemic has been handled will be an important tipping point in the way the people will evaluate this leadership today. There's no doubt on that.
For sure. So that brings me to my next question, which is, you recently made a statement where you said that, the COVID-19 pandemic has shaken the education stakeholders of their complacency and given a new momentum to online learning. Could you please elaborate a little more on that?
See, all of us took to online learning 15 months ago, not by choice, but out of a necessity.
Right.
Nobody wanted to move to online learning in the end of March last year.
Yeah.
But when we were faced with a lockdown, many institutions immediately switched to the online platform. And I think in the last 14 months, this has been the way in which education has gone forward in the country. It is not the best way for learning to have gone forward. It should have, there were serious challenges in the learning framework.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to recognize that we were dealing with a inevitability. You see,
right.
There was no other way in which the transaction of learning could have been taken forward. It is only on the online platform.
Right.
And therefore, it produced its inevitable divides. Those who had access to this platform were able to use it. Those who had limited access to it had problems with it. Those who had no access to it were deprived of the opportunity to learn. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the digital divide in this country became visible in terms of who had access.
Correct.
But I would say as we go forward, many people have asked me this question. Are we going to see visual, are we going to see, what is it called? Are you going to see virtual universities and virtual higher learning in the days to come?
Right.
I would say no. I think learning, when we go into a post-COVID world, I don't know when that will be and what form it will take.
Right.
It is no going back to the pre-COVID world.
Yeah.
I think we are going to see a movement towards blended learning.
Mm-hmm.
where you will see a combination of face-to-face and online.
Right.
I think today leaders of education are realizing that there are advantages of online, but there is no exclusivity of online method. There are various dimensions of learning which can only happen effectively in a face-to-face environment. So I'm not one of those who believes that we are moving to a virtual world with regard to learning. Today looks to be a virtual world because we have no other option.
Yeah.
But when options become available in the days ahead, it is going to be a blended form of learning. And let me just make one more point. I wanted to make it earlier when you use the term. I'm one of those who believes that during this entire pandemic, there is one term that we used which was a very inappropriate term. And that term is social distancing. I think the word we should have used is physical distancing and not social distancing. What the pandemic required of all of us was physical distancing.
Correct.
Keeping a particular physical distance from each other so that the virus does not spread. Because as a student of social sciences, I know that the word social distancing has a totally different meaning. Social distancing means segregation. Social distancing means, somebody saying that you are rich and I am poor, therefore we will not interact. Social distancing means you belong to X group, I belong to Y group, so we don't interact. Now, that's not what we want. We actually require emotional connecting and not social distancing. Right. What we require is physical distancing. The pandemic has brought families closer. Yeah. The pandemic has brought friends closer. The pandemic has brought brothers and sisters closer. Now, because the pandemic required an emotional connect between people. Yeah. So I would request you through your platform to encourage people to say physical distancing, but avoid the term social distancing, because the term social distancing has its own specific connotations.
Got it. I think that's a new way to look at it, and I'm sure our audience will also take this, because we've also learned from it, right? Because like you said, human beings are social beings. We require that, if not that touch, at least we do crave that emotional security, whether it's from family, friends. And I think just knowing that all of us were in it together is what also kept most of us going during the hard times. So with this, I hope that we've covered, almost everything, but I want to conclude this discussion by asking you, sir, that you have been a political analyst for your longest time, right? And with now, we are in the midst of the second wave, but yeah, we are also headed towards the third wave. So, and that is being predicted. But, with your thoughts, how do you think the government should be tackling this once we get into it? What are your suggestions and what would you like to conclude with?
I would believe that those in power, both at the national level and at the state level, would have learned the lessons from the second pandemic. And if at all there is to be a third wave, I hope at least now we would be much more prepared, much more proactive, much more cautious in being able to deal with that situation. If not anything else, our lapses during the second wave should alert us to how we need to be careful if at all a third wave is going to emerge. And I think this is not just true of governments. Right. This is also true for citizens like you and me and other social groups that are there. I think everywhere we need to spread the message of the need to be cautious, the need to be careful, the need to be prudent in the way we do things and not assume that because the second wave is receding, we can drop our guard. I think we constantly need to be on our guard and understand that this virus is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And we need to have a much longer battle with it and ensure that citizens across the country get vaccinated. I think this is something which we really need to work on as we move forward as a society and as a government.
Yeah, yeah. So I think just, like you rightly mentioned, it is us against the problem instead of this entire, situation of who is to be blamed and whatnot. Of course, that is a constant debate that will be going on. But the larger picture at hand is, just taking care and being there for one another in ways that we should be actually there for people. So, I'm actually really happy that we had this chat, sir, because I got to learn so much, and I hope that everyone who's watching this video on our channel gets to do that as well. So thank you so much for doing this with us.
Pleasure talking to you.